Hey, what's going on, everybody? Max here with BB, and today for 10 Minutes Max, we are going to be diving into the most important question for all of crypto. Is the Bitcoin bottom in? We are going to go over a lot of different charts today, a lot of different scenarios, and I'm going to give my totally unfiltered thoughts on the most high probability scenario that I see from where we are currently at. But let's not waste any time, guys. Let's dive right into it. So, first things first. Bitcoin back basically at 90K, kind of bobbing around between, 89 and 92, 93. It did squeeze a little bit over the weekend, but you know how we feel about weekend squeezes. Basically, the way that I'm viewing Bitcoin is the following. We have a very big level above us, and we also have a very big level below us. We're just starting with this. Don't worry. We're going to get into a lot of different charts, okay? Let me move it up so you can see it. I'm not cutting it off. There is a very, very significant level right below us. This huge volume cluster right here, right? That basically begins at like 73 with a bit of an inefficiency right below it. But then also right above us, we have this huge cluster, right? And, that's potentially going to be an issue if we do move up from here, is this cluster, right? This high volume cluster that's above us. And I guess maybe I should say when a high volume cluster is above us or high volume node is above us, it will typically act as a bit of resistance, okay, as a bit of resistance. So as you can see, we've kind of been nestling up against it. We've had a few problems here, and people will maybe be confused as to why that is, right? Like why, right? Like there's volume up here. Like, why can't we just go right through it, right? And I'm going to take this opportunity to show you a new script of mine. All right, so this is, this right here is the, I don't even know if I've officially named it yet, BB volume profile, but it's a lot more advanced than a normal profile. I've got some custom settings on here, and these show actual amounts of buy and sell delta at every single level. Basically, that's just a fancy way to say whatever this number is over here, that's the net amount of longs or shorts that opened at each level, okay? So I can also throw on here, some actual like volume bars so you can see, and I'll turn the heat map off just for a moment. Okay, so this is the actual net positioning skew, all right? So not just volume, but actual positioning. And what we're looking at is actually 5 different exchanges. We're looking at Binance, Bybit, OKX, Coinbase, Kraken. So you can see this giant red level is the actual amount of shorts that came in at this level, okay? So this is like the highest volume level, which also just happens to be the most shorted level, okay? So if we come up to this level, the assumption should be that shorts are going to defend their positions, right? They're going to play defense. We got an entry from, 95, 96. It's not an assumption. It's real exchange volume data, real positioning data, okay? So reject from up there, right? They're going to protect their positions. If they can't protect their positions, and we see us back above this level, similarly to just looking at this high volume node, right? This just shows actual volume, not actual positioning skew. We would expect from that point forward, we would expect quite a move higher, right? So really the level you need to focus on right now is probably about 96.5, give or take, okay? That's the point of control, the area in which the most volume occurred. And it's also where I'm showing you right here, the area in which the most shorts actually came in. And we would like to see, if we're bullish, we'd like to see those shorts pressured. We'd like to see them underwater. If people that shorted 96 are suddenly down on the position, they're going to start fearing. They're going to have to close their shorts, which entails them basically buying back in, and that will fuel us for a move higher, right? So, that's decent, right? We've got a good level, but also something to consider is this level right here. Basically 92.5 to 88.6. A lot of buy volume at that level. And all of those people are kind of struggling to keep their head above water right now. So it's not exactly the best sign We can increase the amount of bins a little bit here so we can get a more granular view on what's going on. This is the same thing. I just made it a little bit more granular so we can zoom in and see here. Um, so again, you can see just as this is your most heavily shorted level, I'll just kind of draw it out right here. So the majority of your shorts have actually come in right here. You also have a lot of people that are aggressively trying to buy Bitcoin right here. There's kind of a bit of a tug of war going on, right? Bit of a tug of war. A lot of people trying to buy Bitcoin right here. A lot of people trying to sell Bitcoin slightly above, okay? If you're bullish, you're going to want to see us above 96 and a half. You're going to want these longs from right here. You're going to want to see these guys come out on top, successfully long. You want them in profit in the money, and you want these shorts just above us to have to close, which would fuel a rally higher. Okay. The thing I don't love about this right now is that, we do have quite a bit of longs coming in between 92.5 and 89.5. And there's quite a bit of ammo where, like, if we did start to roll over in here, all these guys longing right here would end up puking, and that would likely send us down quite a bit lower. Okay. I also do find it to be somewhat interesting that I'll put I'll turn part of the heat map back on, just the single prints. So this is showing levels in which basically our, traders will now call FEGs, right? Single prints or FEGs or imbalances. There's a lot of different names for them these days, but basically they're regions in which there was not a lot of volume and price just kind of like sliced through it, and they kind of act as magnets. I find it to be very interesting that on this channel we've been watching this. So essentially this to be kind of your range, right? So range high, mid-range, range low. And when we actually look at the net positioning skew on my indicator here, what we can see is that there's a lot of people trying to buy right in here. There was a lot of aggressive shorts above us, but they're not really pressured because they're in the money, right? Like they're up on their shorts. But what I find really interesting is these yellow shades down here. These are single prints. So right at the opposing end of this range, we've been talking about how ranges love symmetry, right? Like if we were to come down here, it would just be a symmetrical deviation of the range low, then we can talk about probably going higher. I find it to be very interesting that there's all these single prints down here, right? Where like we basically didn't get any positioning. We just kind of sliced through these levels. Yeah, at the time it looks like, we actually Trump won the election, we sliced up, but we also had some more little inefficiencies kind of right up in here towards the April bottom. So I do find it to be very interesting, this positional skew. This is a little granular. I can bring this down a little bit here. So it's very interesting to actually take a look at the net positioning of the market, right? Like not just the range, but within the range, how are people actually positioned, right? Because that can help you really gauge, like, are we setting up to move lower? Are longs going to continue to puke? Or, are shorts being too aggressive at the lows? Are we going to squeeze higher, right? Lots of good questions that can be answered by this indicator, right? So I just wanted to talk about the high time frame range actual positioning, right? Actual positioning. So if you're bullish, you really want to see above 95, 96, that's kind of your level, and then we can put, a real good squeeze on them. But if not, we're probably gonna see a little bit lower. Okay. So I wanted to start with that. I also do want to talk about another chart here. So what I wanted to talk about was Bitcoin's funding. All right. So this is a chart. I posted a picture of this on my X maybe 2 weeks ago, 10 days ago, something like that. And I basically highlighted the fact that Bitcoin typically bottoms when there's periods of prolonged negative funding. All right. So what that means for those that are not familiar, negative funding is simply just for futures traders. If you're trading Bitcoin on futures, perpetual futures, or just like if you're on Bybit trading, Bitcoin USDT.P, right? You're trading the perps account. You are borrowing money, or it's like there's a margin component to it, right? It's different for everybody. But when you get these periods of negative funding, it typically indicates that you are at an extreme, right? And when there's negative funding, it means that you can actually get paid by your counterparty to long Bitcoin when there's negative funding. And similarly, when funding is really positive, shorts can actually get paid to short from their counterparty, okay? So let's look at where the negative funding has been historically. And let's actually mark it out. So I'm going to drag this up onto the chart quick. So this histogram at the bottom is Bitcoin's aggregated exchange funding. This includes multiple large exchanges, not just one. And let's get a rectangle out. So let's mark out where we've seen some periods of prolonged negative funding. Okay. So negative funding is in the red down at the bottom. Okay. So here's a period of negative funding. And let's add another one. We saw some negative funding here, temporarily. All right. And we saw some negative funding here. The August-September 2024 low. And we saw some negative funding here. All right. And I guess technically we saw a very little bit of negative funding here, just kind of little spurts of it, right? Not like where it goes negative for a candle, but like where it will kind of dip its toe into negative funding multiple times. And what we're actually seeing now is we are starting to see some negative funding right here. Okay. So these are all the higher time frame examples of where we've seen negative funding on Bitcoin, more or less for the duration of this cycle. All right. And you can see how price typically reacts to negative funding is you basically put in a bottom, right? That's kind of simplest of terms. That's basically what's going on here. Now, here's the thing about it though. We may have little spurts of negative funding, and that's helpful, right? That's nice. But it doesn't necessarily mean that like the bottom is in. All right. And like this is maybe a good example, right? We saw a pretty accumulative move here where like we deviated the low, right? Numerous times we kind of stabbed at the lows here. Back here in, August, September, this was an incredibly accumulative structure where it's like 1, 2, 3 drive into the low. You're seeing absorption with negative funding. We move higher. What we're seeing right now is like we just kind of have these empty lows right here. Let me hop back to the trading view chart here. So what I mean more specifically, like let's just look at the structure, okay? Typically, a high time frame bottom will form. Let me turn. Okay. So I turned this indicator on that highlights. This is another one of my scripts. It highlights volume that is a standard, like 1.5 to 2.5 standard deviations from its 20 candle rolling mean. So basically, fancy way to say it indicates when you're seeing outsized buying or selling. Okay. So what we saw right here at this global bottom was very interesting. We saw a sweep of the low, breakdown attempt with a big red candle, huge statistical outlier sell volume. Okay. So it was accumulative, right? Trap was set, then we move higher. How about over here? Same thing. Look at this base that was built. You saw 1, 2, 3. Look at these red candles. Huge sell volume. 1, 2, 3 at the low. Absorption, right? Clear absorption. Sellers can't move it down. Okay. How about this one? From this low, right? We also had negative funding in here. Look what we did. Swept the low, huge sell volume, absorption, we move higher, right? So we've looked at a few examples now of, and also right here. This was another one where we had negative funding. Swept the low, huge sell volume. Again, look at the red candle. Breakdown attempt failed, we buoy higher. So what are we seeing right now? Not that, okay? We're seeing not that, unfortunately. What we're seeing is lows wide open, and you're actually seeing blue candles. You're seeing them come in, and we're actually seeing aggressive buying coming in right now. So that kind of goes back to, the BB volume profile indicator, which I will publish soon for our members, where let me go back to the 2-day. See these buys right here? These guys from 90, 92 to 87, 7, 87, 7. See that? What's basically going on here is we are not seeing, the typical signs of like sell absorption down at the lows. We're seeing some absorption, but these lows are left here vulnerable. And I do worry that there might be another like breakdown attempt, right? And it's not even a worry in the sense of like, you should freak out about it. It's just like for those getting really bullish here, I say this isn't typically the structure you see at the bottom. It doesn't mean that it can't be because it's Bitcoin. Bitcoin can bottom whenever Bitcoin feels like it. Bitcoin has a way of just kind of coming back from like a bad looking situation. But this is not typically what we see a bottom look like. So again, cautious, a little bit optimistic, looking for some sort of clear absorption event, right? Looking for some clear absorption event where we can say, yeah, sellers really tried to break this thing down and it didn't work. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for that. And the structure that I see here, again, is not exactly a familiar accumulative structure. What would look a lot more accumulative would be something like this, right? If you were to like roll over, big drop, huge sell volume candle, and then immediately engulf it. That would look so bullish, right? That would look so bullish. But this right here, all I see is just kind of lows, right? So how high could we squeeze? Maybe you could come up into there. We'll see. See if they really want to squeeze some late shorts, but it's just not typically how bottom looks. But that doesn't mean that we can't bottom here, right? Come here. Let's look at this. Okay? Let me give you a perfect example. Okay? This was technically more accumulative, right? This is another prime example. This is last cycle. Look at this, this range over here. Look at how we were sliding down into the lows. You might say, well, we didn't take out this low max. And I say, well, actually we did. We technically had a close below it, right? That's the Wix can play a trick on you, right? So we dive down, low, 12-hour daily close, huge sell volume. See the red candle? Immediately engulfed. And then we buoy higher. Sellers cannot break it down. But look how bad that structure looked, right? Look how ugly that is. That looked like, I'm pretty sure Michael Burry was calling for a head and shoulders pattern, like down to here, and he's the big short guy, he's the shorter. He's the shorter that everybody knows, right? So anyways, I'm looking for signs of, accumulation ultimately. Again, this is another prime. We had negative funding here. This is when Silicon Valley Bank went down, right? Swept this low, huge sell volume, we buoy higher, right? So I'm just continuing to show a few examples, more than a few, as to is the bottom in here? It could be, but this is not typically what you see at a bottom. It doesn't mean it can't be. It's just not typically what you see. All right. So those are kind of my soft thoughts with Bitcoin. We've got some negative funding. We're down, we already hit down like 35% from the all-time high. Pretty good spot. But, are you early? You could be right on your idea of like the Bitcoin bottom kind of being in and buy it here. And then we go here and you puke on a 15K drop. And then it rips face and you would have been right, but you didn't wait for the signs of like accumulation, right? Which is, huge sell volume into a sweep of a low. What we're seeing is buy volume walking this up, kind of bear flagging, if we're being honest. Like that's kind of a bear flag. So I don't think the bottom is necessarily in. But I think we could be close, right? Like I really do think we could be close. I do. I think we could be close. And just look for some signs of accumulation, which I don't see right now, but maybe we will see soon, right? But it's not all bad. It's not all bad. Going over to Tether dominance, which is just inverse crypto. I want to look at this on the higher time frame. For those that aren't familiar with this chart, this has an inverse relationship with with crypto. All right, when this chart moves up, crypto moves down. So if you're a bull, you want to see this chart nuke. If you're a bear, you want to see this chart pump. Let me show you. I will add total down below, which is just everything in crypto. And I'll just really quickly point this out, right? So you can see Tether dominance trending higher, total trending lower. Tether dominance nuking, total ripping. Tether dominance higher, total nuking. Total dominance trending down, total ripping. Tether dominance trending higher, total nuking, right? You see the relationship. It's pretty clear. So when we look at this chart, where could we potentially go to look for a bottom? Well, to me, this looks pretty much like a clear range at this point. I would say the most bullish thing for crypto here is that you are at range high. Like you've rejected from here once, twice, three times, kind of four. This would be your fifth. You are at range high, right? And it's sometimes tough being like a breakout longer, for sure. Doesn't mean you can't, but it's you're at range high, right? But here's the thing. You are at range high, but you're also at range high after basically like an inverse head and shoulders. Okay. And accumulation where we swept the low, came back, retested demand, and then moved higher. So you're at range high, but you're at range high off of like a really bullish setup, right? Which is different than being at range high over here, where this was just a bearish walk up for Tether dominance. So I look at this and, if we are to break out, we're most likely coming up into this region, which for Bitcoin, if we were to see Tether dominance move up into this region, maybe it goes to the red box, maybe just short, don't know, don't really care at this point. You would most likely see Bitcoin kind of complete the range, the drive down to the range low, somewhere with a 7 handle. So it would probably look like this. Like this. And then you'd see this, stab up here and then probably tuck back under the range, right? They're both in ranges, right? So, it's just kind of more reason where I look at it and I'm like, we could definitely squeeze here, like that's on the table, but I do just worry a little bit about how this bottom looks, meaning it doesn't really look like a bottom right now. I want it to really badly, but it just doesn't. So either we'll squeeze higher and then reject, or we'll go down from here and, then look for that, huge sell volume, and I'll update you guys as I see that. Or we'll redefine what a bottom can look like and just start ripping, and I'm cool with that too. Like I'm fully aware Bitcoin can do whatever it wants to do, like on any given day. Looking at Bitcoin on the Volume Fusion Pro, this is actually a new strategy which we've just finished discovery on, basically. This is actually better than the last one that I showed you guys. So this one actually going back all cycle, um, I mean, more or less all cycle to March 12th, 2023, basically all cycle, has a win rate of 58.5%, profit factor of nearly 3.5. It's taken 113 trades. Its max drawdown during that time was only 9.65%. And it's beating Bitcoin by 200% with one of the cleanest P&L curves that maybe we've ever seen. It's a brand new strategy, hot off the press, just discovered. Look at this thing. Juggernaut, right? One of the best VFP strategies we have so far. But we have a team of experts working on this right now to find even more, not just for Bitcoin. So, anyways, let's go over this. Let's talk about how this is positioned right now. So, again, if you were to look at this and say, okay, if there was a guy on Twitter, I say this every video because I find it kind of funny to say, there's a guy on Twitter who went by the name Bitcoin Trader 777. And he posted this P&L curve and said, "Yeah, I only trade Bitcoin. I trade it long and short. I trade on the 6-hour time frame. Here's my results all cycle. I'm up 546%. Bitcoin's up, 350%. I've only had a max drawdown of 9.65%. I've taken 113 trades in a couple years, 2.5 years, and I win almost 60% of the time with a profit factor of 3.46. You would say to yourself, oh, okay, we ought to pay attention to what Bitcoin Trader 777 is saying, right? We ought to pay attention to it. So let's talk about Bitcoin Trader 777, or really it's Volume Fusion Pro. How's it positioned right now? So right now, with a 58% win rate, it's actually in a short, and it's slightly down on it. It's short from 89,391. Okay. 89,391. When would it flip long? The Volume Fusion Pro would actually flip to when it's under this orange cloud right here, this thing. It only takes shorts. When it's above the this orange cloud, it only takes longs. It will start looking for longs when you see the fusion line above the orange cloud. Then it will go to only looking for longs, which means that despite what the bottom may look like, or how I may feel about the bottom not looking like a bottom, whatever may happen, I will only be looking for longs. When the Volume Fusion Pro, with the trade stats that I just showed you guys, better trader than me, and respectfully, better trader than you, no emotions, with that track record, is telling you, yeah, it's time to long. It is time to long. And if it flips back, then it flips back. But the point in me showing you this is we're actually getting really close to either one of the worst bearish continuation setups we've ever seen or a flip to the long side. When I say bearish continuation, I mean if this goes into, the orange here and then starts moving down, that means we have so much lower to go. Like we can rip all the way down here to the bottom cloud, right? We typically never exit the cloud. You can see that during the most extreme buying, we top at, the top of the cloud, and we bottom basically, almost we don't really even we don't go below it. Here's one time we went below it, but that was, FTX collapsing, right? So, we saw a little bit extra selling than we normally would. So either this is like the worst bearish continuation pattern ever, and basically we're going to see this just rip down from here, and that this is what it's going to look like. Or, and it's not up for me to decide, I'm going to let the Volume Fusion Pro decide because I'm emotional. I want certain things. This is a robot. It doesn't, right? It does not care. It works off of 1,000 conditions that I gave it, right? Or we flip this, hold the cloud. This we'll probably see us move up into here, hold in here, right? And then we would see a green cloud printing underneath here, right? And then we will be looking for longs. And this is just a weird bottom. So the point of me showing you this is there's a big move brewing here, okay? Either this is a horrific bearish retrace before we nuke, or we're getting ready to long. I don't know which one it is. I'm skeptical of the bottom because it doesn't look like a bottom. But with that said, we could very well, there's not even a great example of it. I mean, maybe it would be like, in terms of bearish continuation, something like one of these two where we nuke, go up into it, and then reject hard from it again. That was the August 5th nuke, right? So we went from short, we're in neutral waiting for green, and then, caught this nuke or whatever. But so it's like we're trying to work on either an awful bearish continuation pattern, or, we could get some longs in here very soon. And I'm telling you, if we get some longs in here soon, we're going to have a lot of fun. But it's not quite there yet. I'm just walking you through what this system will ultimately be looking for in order to flip from short only, which it's been looking for shorts. It's literally been looking for shorts since basically the beginning of October, and it's only taken shorts. But it could potentially only start looking for longs if we get that flip up, which we haven't gotten yet. So anyways, all right, guys, that's basically it for today. We're at about the half-hour mark. That should be pretty good. Thanks for tuning in. Please like and subscribe before you go. If you want access to some of the indicators I was showing you guys today, we give those away to our community included in your Discord membership, so check that out. Thanks for being here, and we will see you guys next Monday. Everybody have a great day, stay safe, and take care.